Welcome to The Inner Elder, Reflections on What Life Teaches Us. Today, David Lowry invites us into a deep conversation about wholeness, what it is, how we lose it, how to rediscover it, and how to live from a place of honesty, compassion, and inner alignment. Across 5 movements, David explores the quiet questions beneath our lives and the lessons our experiences have been trying to teach us through the quiet voice each of us possesses, the inner elder.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Inner Elder, where we have conversations and reflect upon life lessons that we've learned over the years. I'm David Lowry, your host, and I'm so glad that you're with me today. Today, we want to explore the concept of wholeness. It's something that we gain as we become older, and if we listen to that inner voice within, we can learn more about who we are, where we're going, and we see a wholeness taking place that once might have surprised us. We never knew if we would get there or not. There's a question that lives quietly beneath everything, and the question we should be asking is, am I living in a way that is making me whole or in a way that's slowly dividing me? We don't ask it directly. It's a tension between what we say and what we mean. It's the subtle unease of living out of alignment, the gap between what we believe and how we actually live. It creates an inner friction. For instance, we can say we value honesty, but then we find ourselves avoiding those difficult conversations when we need to have them. And we say we want peace, but something inside of you keeps reaching for conflict. You say you want a simpler life, but then you crowd your days and there's no margin. Over time, this misalignment doesn't just stay on the surface, it begins to divide you deeply on the inside. When we first started doing it, it wasn't dramatic at first, but quietly, almost imperceptibly, a part of you knows what's true. And you know that there's another part of you that's moving in a different direction than you want to go. And the longer we allow that split to continue, the more exhausting life becomes, because now you're not just living your life, you're having to manage the tension that's inside, because you're really holding together 2 versions of yourself. There's the one you present, and then there's the one you privately feel. And what makes this even more difficult is that this division is often easier for others to see than it is for us to see. Other people notice the contradictions in our words and actions, and they can see inconsistency in our presence. We think we have it all under control, but we don't. In the inside, it feels like confusion. For instance, we'll tell ourselves we're doing our best and explain our story to stay comfortable, but the division continues because we're not being honest with ourselves. We're unaware and out of touch. Carl Jung once observed that the privilege of a lifetime is to become truly who you are. Listen to that again. The privilege of a lifetime is to become truly who you are. But becoming who we truly are isn't that simple, because life is always pulling us apart before it teaches us how to come back together. We are shaped by all kinds of expectations. We're shaped by roles, the need to belong, and somewhere along the way we began to live in response to those forces instead of the alignment with our own deep knowing. And then something begins to shift. For many of us, this shift comes a little quietly in the second half of life. It's not a crisis necessarily, but the realization that we cannot keep living divided. We begin to feel a deeper need for honesty and authenticity, and to have a life that actually fits who we are. And with that awareness comes another realization. We may not have noticed just how divided we had become, because for much of our lives we were trying to be what was needed. We wanted to be accepted, to be respected, to be included, so we learned to adapt. We pleased our parents, and we wanted to meet the expectations of our families. We wanted to fit into workplaces, communities, and institutions that quietly told us who we should be or who they wanted us to be. And we learn which friendships would advance us and which ones might hold us back. We learn what to say, and very importantly, we learn what we should not say. We learn what to believe, how to vote, and how to behave. Because if we question too much, we risk something we all fear, and that was being dismissed, being misunderstood, being left behind, or being considered irrelevant. So we adjusted, and over time, those adjustments became the patterns of our lives. And those patterns became what other people thought of who we were and what our life was all about. And that tension built slowly year after year until we began to feel something we can't quite explain. Maybe it's a loss of joy or a sense of desperation or quiet dissatisfaction or just a sense that something's off. It isn't quite right. Not because your life has failed, but because something within us is not aligned. We were never meant to live a divided life. We were made for inner harmony, where our inner worlds and outer worlds are not always in collision with one another. And now at this stage in life, something within begins to call us back to the parts that we set aside, back to the questions we stopped asking, back to the values we once held but labeled as impractical or unrealistic or maybe idealistic. We begin to wonder, what would it look like if I could go back and live those truths right here, right now? Maybe not perfectly, maybe not all at once, but more honestly. Perhaps a wholeness would happen. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about returning to who we were and what we should have been all along. And finally, allowing that life to take shape in the world around us. And this is where the quiet question begins to matter, not as judgment, but more as an invitation. Where in my life am I out of alignment? Where am I saying one thing but living another? Where have I slowly learned to ignore what I know? Because the beginning of wholeness isn't perfection, it's awareness. It's the moment you notice that gentle inner elder voice that says, I'm divided. Something in me is out of order. And instead of turning away, you stay. And this time you listen and allow that awareness to become the first movement back towards a life that is whole.
In this first movement, David helped us recognize the quiet ways we drift out of alignment, how we split ourselves between who we are and who we think we must be. It's an invitation to notice the places where our inner and outer lives no longer match. In the next section, David turns toward what our lives have been trying to teach us, and how regret can become a doorway to wisdom.
If we're honest, the moment we begin to notice the ways we've been divided, we'll notice another feeling follows close at hand, and that feeling is regret. We begin to see more clearly the choices we made, the ways we adapted, the moments we went against our own knowing. It's tempting to turn that awareness into judgment, to replay the past with sharper eyes and draw harsh conclusions, to say things and ask things like, why did I stay so long? Why didn't I speak up? Why did I become someone I never intended to be? But this is where the path forward towards wholeness can quietly turn in the wrong direction. Because wholeness is not found in explaining away our pain, and it's not found in excusing it either. It's not about rewriting the past so that it feels more comfortable, and it's not about assigning blame to ourselves or to others. Wholeness asks you to do something very different. It says, let's look at this again, not with judgment, but with curiosity, to become, in a sense, a student of our own life, and to ask those questions. What did that experience teach me? What has my life been trying to teach me? Not just the successes, but the disappointments too. Not the moments of clarity, but the seasons of confusion. Not just the times where we got everything right, but especially the times when we didn't get it right. We carry wounds, and we realize we've wounded and hurt others. Neither of these disqualifies us from becoming whole. The poet Maya Angelou once said, "Do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better." There's quiet dignity in that because it allows us to hold our past without collapsing under it. Sure, there were things we didn't see, and yes, there were ways in which we fell short. There were moments we would live differently if we knew then what we know now. But there was also learning and growth and a gradual awakening that couldn't have happened any other way. Wholeness is not about living in shame for who we have been or what we've done in the past. And it's not about holding yourself in quiet contempt for all of those things. It's about allowing the light of awareness, what I call the voice of your inner elder, to illuminate what those experiences meant and have given you. When we look closely, even the most difficult seasons of life shaped something important in us. Maybe it was patience or discernment, humility, maybe compassion. We may not have chosen the circumstances, but we're not the same person we once were because of them. And this is when something begins to shift. Instead of asking, "How do I get past this?" we begin to ask, "What has this made possible in me?" Instead of trying to remove the past, we begin to integrate it. We see that even our missteps can be part of a larger becoming. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard wrote, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." Perhaps this is what he meant, that understanding comes not from erasing the past, but from revisiting it with new eyes, from recognizing that we have, over time, become someone shaped by experience. We've become someone who learned, someone who adapted, someone who has grown, and maybe it's reluctantly. We've become someone who's become worthy of respect, especially our own respect. And we're deserving of it, not because we got everything right, but because we stayed in the conversation with life long enough to learn something true about ourselves. Wholeness is not a return to who we once were. It's the acceptance of who we have become despite all of the things that we lived through. And in the willingness to live from that place with honesty and humility and with a deeper and kind compassion for ourselves and others, we're able to make the second movement towards wholeness, which is not fixing the past and not escaping it, but allowing it to finally speak to us. And maybe this is a good moment to try something simple. If you're listening now, you might let your mind drift to a moment in your life that still carries a little heat. Not the worst thing you've ever done, but something that still tugs at you. It's a choice you regret, a silence you kept, a version of yourself you no longer recognize. Don't analyze it, don't defend it, and don't explain it away. Just hold it gently as if you were holding a photograph of a younger self, and then ask quietly, "What was life trying to teach me through this?" Don't ask, "What should I have done?" And don't say, "How can I erase this?" But what wisdom was given to me that I could not see at the time? Maybe it taught you how to be more honest. Maybe it taught you what happens when you abandon yourself. Maybe you were taught the cost of silence. Maybe you learned the necessity of boundaries or the truth of your own worth. Whatever rises, let it rise without argument. This is how the inner elder speaks, not through shame, but through clarity. And if nothing comes, that's all right too. Sometimes the lesson arrives slowly. Sometimes we have to live in those questions until you find your answers. But for now, it's enough to turn towards your life with curiosity instead of condemnation, and trust that even the parts you wish you could rewrite have been shaping you into someone more awake, more honest, and more whole.
In this movement, David reminded us that our past, even the parts we wish we could rewrite, holds lessons that can soften and deepen us. Wholeness begins when we look at our lives with curiosity instead of judgment. Coming up next, David explores how rigid beliefs and the need for certainty can divide us from ourselves and from one another, and why living inside the questions is essential for becoming whole.
There's a kind of certainty that feels like safety at first. Many of us were taught to crave the feeling of having the right answer. We've always known that people value people with answers, and they value answers more than honest questions. And that's our problem, to believe that confidence is virtue instead of questioning, to believe that doubt is a flaw. And some of us were praised when we repeated what we were told. Some of us were punished when we wondered out loud. Slowly and quietly, we learned to stop asking so many questions. We learned to mistrust our curiosity and to shrink our questions so that we could fit inside the expectations of others. We started to trade the living, breathing mystery of life for the comfort of certainty. But life is too complex for simple answers. Even a simple life has a hidden complexity. Every person you meet is carrying a story you cannot see. And every choice you've made has roots that go deeper than you remember. Every belief you hold was shaped by forces you didn't choose. Certainty pretends otherwise. It flattens the world. It makes us believe that complexity is a threat instead of an invitation. When we cling to certainty, we begin to lose something essential, and that's our capacity for compassion. Because certainty needs enemies. It needs someone to blame. When the world refuses to stay simple, it needs someone to condemn. When life becomes too complicated for the answers we were given, we harden, judge, we divide. We demand mercy for our own shortcomings while withholding it from others for theirs. That's the hidden cost of a belief system that cannot hold complexity. It fractures us from the inside. But when we become whole, we don't demand certainty. Wholeness does not require you to be right. It doesn't punish you for asking questions. Wholeness invites you to live inside the questions, to seek and trust seeking. It's a form of faith to believe that truth is something we grow toward, not something we possess. Wholeness asks us to stay open, to stay curious, to stay human, because the moment we stop questioning, we stop becoming. We stop becoming whole. If you'd like to try something here, let it be this gentle experiment. Bring to mind a situation in your life where you feel absolutely certain that you're right, certain that you're right, certain that you understand, and certain you already know how the story goes. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It could be an old story you've told a million times, just something that feels settled, maybe too settled in your mind. Hold that certainty in your mind the way you might hold a stone, something solid, familiar, unquestioned, and then very quietly ask one small question. What else might be true here? This is not to undo your perspective or prove yourself wrong, but just to make a little space. Then ask another question. What might I be missing because I stopped looking? And then ask one more question. If I were curious instead of certain, what would I want to understand? Begin to let questions soften the edges of your certainty. Create a little more space in the room and notice what happens inside of you when you stop gripping the answer and always giving the same reply. Start listening for the possibilities that might be there. Maybe you'll feel a loosening, a breath you didn't know you were holding. You may feel resistance because the mind has the old habit of tightening around what it thinks it knows. Or you may feel nothing at all, which is also a beginning. The point isn't to replace one answer with another. The point is to remember that certainty is a closed door. Curiosity is a window. Sometimes all we need is a little more light.
In this third movement, David showed us how certainty can harden the heart, how the need to be right can shrink our compassion, and how curiosity opens us again to truth, complexity, and connection. In the next section, David turns to the moments when life feels unsteady and how surrender, presence, and humility help us stay human when control slips through our fingers.
Staying human when life feels unsteady is a very difficult thing for us to do. There's a moment in every life when the illusion of control finally cracks. Not because we failed, but because we were human all along. We discover sometimes painfully that life does not bend to our will, that outcomes slip through our fingers, and that even our best efforts cannot guarantee the future we imagine. Strangely, this is where something beautiful can happen. When control falls away, we're invited into a deeper kind of seeing, a clarity that does not come from certainty, but surrender. Not the surrender of defeat, but the surrender of truth, the kind that says, I cannot shape the world, but I can shape the way I meet the world. In this kind of surrender, we begin to notice beauty in places we once overlooked. There's a tenderness in grief, and there's wisdom in disappointment. Sometimes we miss those things. There's quiet courage in simply continuing. We begin to see that even in terrible circumstances, we can carry a hidden luminosity. And this isn't because suffering is good, but because your soul is capable of growing roots in the darkest night and the darkest soil. Trials often deepen us, and loss can soften us. Uncertainty can humble us into something more spacious, more compassionate, and real. We learn to recognize what's truly worthy: kindness, presence, honesty, and love. Because everything else has proven itself to be too fragile to trust. Slowly, we stop trying to control life and start participating in it. We stop gripping outcomes and start attending to moments. We stop demanding guarantees and we start cultivating resilience. This is how the soul grows, not through certainty, but through surrender. Not through having all the answers, but becoming someone who can live without them. In that spaciousness, we find steadiness that control could never give us. A steadiness not rooted in power, but in presence. Not in prediction, but in trust. Not in mastery, but in humanity.
In this fourth movement, David invited us to see the quiet beauty that emerges when we stop trying to control life and begin to meet it with presence. He reminded us that the soul grows through surrender, and that resilience is born in the very places we once resisted. In our final movement, David brings these ideas home, offering simple daily practices that help us live in wholeness one small act at a time.
Wholeness is not something we achieve. It is something we practice in small, almost invisible ways. It happens in the quiet moments when no one is watching. And choices that seem too small to matter shape us all the same. Because becoming whole is not a grand transformation, it's a daily orientation, a way of turning towards life instead of away from it. It often begins with something as simple as peace, maybe as small as your morning coffee, a slow breath before the day begins, a moment of stillness that reminds you you are allowed to be human. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to begin again. Then you move to sharing your presence by reaching out to someone, a friend, a colleague, a family member, not to fix them, not to impress them, but simply to be with them, to say, I'm here, I see you, I remember you, you matter. You create meaning with your life. You do your work with intention. You offer your gifts with sincerity. You let your life be useful in ways that feel honest and true. Meaning is not found in achievement. It's found in attention. And you offer knowledge. You share what you've learned, not as a performance, but as generosity. Wisdom grows when it's given away, but stinginess will shrink your soul. Sharing enlarges it. Wholeness recognizes others. Send a note of encouragement. Speak a kind word. Name the good you see in someone who has forgotten it in themselves. Recognition is a form of healing. And let yourself know that you are important too. You belong. Sit at a table with someone you love. Share a meal without distraction. Give your undivided attention, which is the rarest gift in our time. Belonging is not something we earn, it's something we practice. Restore yourself. Move your body, nourish it, rest it. Honor the vessel that carries your soul throughout the world. Restoration is not indulgence, it's stewardship. If you can, pray for someone. Hold them in your heart. Send a quiet blessing. Whisper their name in silence. Prayer is a form of presence that travels farther than we know. Wholeness is not a solitary journey. It's always reciprocal. The shape of a whole life happens as we practice small things. We become less reactive and more responsive. We're less guarded and more open, less driven by fear and more guided by love. Trust that the soul grows through ordinary acts of attention, that meaning is made a moment at a time. Wholeness is not a destination, but a way of walking. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, we become someone whose life is aligned from the inside out. Someone who's not perfect, but present. Not certain, but grounded. Not unbroken, but beautifully human. This is the practice of becoming whole, to live in such a way that your life becomes a blessing to yourself, to others, and the world.
Thank you for listening to The Inner Elder. If today's reflections stirred something in you, let it continue to unfold gently in the hours ahead. Remember, wholeness is not a destination. It's a way of living, one honest moment at a time. If you like our program, please subscribe and recommend it to a friend. Transcripts are available at theinnerelder.com. Until next time, may you walk with clarity, compassion, and the quiet wisdom of your own inner elder.